Thank you very much, Shuchi, and Priya also for the technical organization. Which is wonderful to have somebody who supports this, technique things, because,
Thank you,
this is the most important thing for
I
screening.
Agree. I agree. The Biennale can't happen without Priya.
No, thank you so much, Priya. Yeah. Also, I'm very happy to welcome you here for this lunchtime afternoon screening, and talk with Nico Joana Weber. Yeah, whom I also would like to welcome, of course. Welcome, Nico. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to screen your film here during this event. Nico, I would like to give you some background information before the screening starts, just that you get a bit of a context, because Nico has two filmic works on display during CPB3. The first is Makazit, a film from 2014 that deals with the University of Bochum, which is a modernist campus university that was founded in 1962 as the first university that was founded in Germany after World War II. And the second one, which will be screened today, and which will also be the topic of today's discussion, is entitled No Longer a Single Route, which is a CPB commission that is presented for the first time during the Biennale. Both of her works can be viewed in CPB's digital screening room. I think it's every Wednesday and Saturday. Am I right, Shuchi and Priya?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe you can also share the link
on
to
the chat. Yeah.
Because you have to register in advance if you wish to access the films that are on display in the screening room. Today, Nico will talk with us and screen her latest project, No Longer a Single Route. And the talk is, I think, scheduled for 1 hour and is divided into two parts. The first is the screening, and we will watch the film together. And after the screening, we will have time to discuss about it. And it's not only my wish to discuss with Nico on my own, but also to open the discussion to the public, of course, to the audience. So I would like to really encourage you to ask your questions. I think there's also a Q&A where you can write them down, but you can also raise your hand and then ask your questions. Or is it not possible today, Shuchi?
That's possible.
It's possible.
You can raise your hand and I can give them permission.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I think just to, because Nico also wanted for us to share with the audience that the current quality of the video that you might see here on Zoom is not at its best optimal quality. These are limitations on Zoom, but maybe if you might want to see the film again, please do register for the screening room so that, you can maybe catch it in the way Nico would like you to catch it. But let's all at least watch it.
Thank you.
Yeah, as an artist, one is always disappointed about the poor quality in a screening. And yeah, that's totally understandable. But this is due to Zoom.
Yes.
Okay, before we start, kindly allow me to give you some more information about our artist, our guest, Nico Joana Weber, who is a visual artist who lives in the German city of Ludwigshafen. And she obtained her education in Cologne at the Kunsthochschule für Medien, is it Academy of Media Arts? In Cologne and in London. And Nico's work has been exhibited widely. And given our schedule, I'm only able to mention that she was awarded the prize of Kunstmuseum Bonn in 2019, where she presented her work Tropic Telecom in a solo exhibition. Tropic Telecom was also screened at HKW Berlin recently. I don't know in which context, but
it was the Rencontre Internationale, the film festival.
Thank you very much. And it will hopefully be screened in other museums soon. And many of her works, and Nico is dealing with global manifestations of modernist architecture. For example, in Brazil or in France, as she did for Tropic Telecom. And by doing so, she often pursues transcultural aspects of architecture and building culture. This is also the case with No Longer a Single Route, which deals with 3 different chapters of building culture in Nigeria. And I won't tell you more about the content of the film because we will watch it together and we have the chance to ask questions about it later. Thank you very much. Enjoy the screening, which Priya starts. And yeah, I'm looking very much forward to having a fruitful discussion afterwards. For me, actually, it was also an exciting experience in a way to watch this work now together with this audience, even if it was a virtual audience, of course, but yeah, it's different to the experience that you have when you watch it on your own. And yeah, I'm really glad we could realize and integrate the screening here into this event. Thank you again, Nico, for also supporting this idea and bringing it forward. Exactly, that's what you mentioned, Shuchi, is one of the main aspects of the work and also of Nico's entire work and thought, I would say, as an artist. So before, I think we could also link this the questions that her work rises up to maybe the situation in Chennai or in India that was already addressed in the chat by Chita Ganesh, and I think it's also a very interesting aspect. I would like to ask you if you could elaborate a bit more on Édouard Glissant's impact on your work and thought as an artist. Already your title quotes the French philosopher, writer, and poet who is one of the pioneers of most influential thinkers of within the post-colonial discourse. I would be glad if you could elaborate a bit more on his influence on your work.
What I find really interesting about his work, and what Shuchi also mentioned, is the fact that he is very subtle and sort of he's not very black and white about his thought process, which is something that I'm very passionate about in my own work. That of course is important to make statements, to analyze architectures, transcultural connections, things like that. But my approach is really about showing the more ambiguous or ambivalent tendencies that are at play. And I find that to be very distinct in Glissant's thought process as well, that he's sort of leaving behind this extremely rationalist and analytical viewpoint, and focuses more on the also what's in between, and that was the reason, and this quote, "No longer a single route," which goes back to his this concept that now is the time where we're leaving behind this sort of singular idea of identity, like a nationalist identity, which is very problematic. I think particularly at the moment, we see it sort of rising again in a lot of different countries. And it's more about, sort of spreading out like a structure of roots that's sort of meeting and touching other roots. Like it's all a system that is sort of linked with each other, and it's not about just this sort of singular identity. And I found that to be very inspiring also mind-opening, because the title is of course also very poetic, and it's not maybe not so clear at the beginning what is meant by it, but I found that to be very fitting with the work.
Thank you very much, Nico. I would like to encourage the audience to also ask questions. Please use the Q&A window, the Q&A chat, to ask your questions. Before they come up, I would like to ask another question that addresses the relation of text and image in your work, because compared to other works that you have created before, this piece has cites a lot of different sources, which of course, as far as I understood it, make also reference to the principle of multiplicity that Glissant is addressing by referring to the concept of the rhizome or rhizomatic process that was outlined by Deleuze and Guattari. So I would be very interested in also learning more about your process, how you found that your sources, how you brought them together also with your personal thoughts. Like there's also always this combination of quotes and personal thoughts and narration that one can find in your work.
Well, you're right that actually it's a very different approach than I have taken in other works. I mean, normally the kind of research that you can very openly see in this work is also there in the other works, but it remains in the background, and it's really that the images are supposed to transmit my thought process, or so it's more like a hidden narrative in a way. But in this case, a lot of research went into also how to structure the film. There was a long time that I wasn't really sure how to actually approach these three locations. How should they be connected? How should they be interwoven? And the more I was reading about all these locations, the more it became clear to me that these locations, they actually need some kind of a framework in order for the viewer to really dive into, you know, the meaning that I also found in them. And that's why I'm also bringing in my personal reflections, because it wasn't supposed to be a documentary about these three places, for example. And I'm sort of more using them to make a point about these kind of rhizomatic connections that we talked about earlier. And so it was really a process that I started writing this voiceover, and more it developed really into an essay that has some images to go with it, rather than the other way around. Usually it's the images that really take the main stage, but here, it just developed in that way. Also, I think it had a lot to do with lockdown. I was thinking, because I was so stuck in my studio, just reading and researching and just spending a lot of time with books. I think that had an impact on how the film took shape in the end as well.
Yeah, but before, I would like to add, you already visited some archives. You went to London. You spent, of course, a long time, several weeks in Nigeria. You talked to different people who had something to say about the buildings you were dealing with in your work. And It's not only
Yeah.
about reading books in the studio, I would
No,
say.
no. I mean, there's always with the kind of work where it's about traveling and exploring other cultures and places. There's always different stages. There's the research that goes into it before you actually travel. Then, of course, on site, you try to gather as much material and input conversations as possible. And then you come back home and you have to, yeah, I usually need a lot of sort of distance to the material as well, because it's about sort of finding the essence of the work that also speaks in a more universal way, because of course this is not just about my impression. I mean, Nigeria, that was an incredibly impressive journey, but I had to also distance myself from myself as a person and what the work is supposed to say, you know, in general terms. But yeah, I also traveled to London and spent some time at the archive and library of the Architectural Association and at the RIBA, because a lot of material I just wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And of course, the AA as an institution is incredibly important for this whole thought process of the knowledge transfer from London to Nigeria. So for me, that was an important starting point to actually try to understand more about these connections and about the historical backdrop.
Thank you. I think this is also, in a way, yeah, typical for your working process, that you start to develop a project and then you, yeah, don't pursue it for a certain period of time. I think in this case, yeah, you spent 3 years working on the project, or maybe a bit more.
Yeah, the shooting took place in 2018, beginning of 2018. Yeah. And yeah, I just finished the film in December. And of course, there's always sort of gaps where I'm not actively working on something, but it's always on the back of your head somewhere, and it needs the time to develop. And yeah, with structuring all these sources and materials, I think it just took a lot more time even than normally, because there was a lot of information to process, and also because, I mean, I'm a complete outsider in Nigerian society, you know, and it was really about, you know, where do I fit in, what is my perspective, what can I sort of offer to the discourse as well, where I think I just needed time to sort of find my own voice again after having read all this material.
I think this is also very important to know, that maybe your point of to enter into this topic was modernist architecture and some assumptions about transcultural aspects and how it is perceived at the moment. And then you opened the field after having experienced the campus in Ibadan. I think the work really got into another direction, and yeah, because you were present and you were able to experience it on your own, and yeah, that it really opened new routes of thought in a way.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that can only happen when you travel somewhere and you're also open-minded about what you find, because of course you can read and research beforehand, but you have to always stay open about what you actually experience when you're there, because I mean, the fact that I was able to see all the Brazilian houses, that was also due to meeting with Adaremi, who helped me to get in contact with the people who live there. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you cannot really plan beforehand, and you have to sort of jump on the opportunity when it arises. And I'm very glad, because I think it gives the work also a much broader perspective than if it had just focused on modernist architecture.
Thank you. There are 2 questions in the Q&A, and there are also some comments in the chat. So maybe I start with one comment, because I find it very important to point it out. A comment by Victoria Norris, a student actually from the University of Duisburg-Essen, who writes, I find the conservationist aspect very important, and would like to thank you for bringing attention to the specific aspect of endangered buildings. I definitely have a lot to think about now, and I found it a very powerful entry point to this topic for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, these all aspects of conservation, that was also something that became very strong for me when I was there. Before the travels, that's not something that I had thought about, because you have to really experience on site the way how fragile the buildings are, where a lot of care is going into the maintenance. For example, in Ibadan, all these sort of important buildings, you know, which are sort of in this, around this central square, they're very well maintained, and there's a lot of pride that goes into that. And then to see on the other hand how the halls of residences have been quite neglected. I mean, all these are things that you can really only experience when you're there to shoot. And I mean, particularly with the Brazilian houses, to me, it was actually quite shocking to see at what a rate they are being destroyed, because especially, I think, as an outsider with an outside perspective, it was so powerful for me to be able to experience these buildings, because they in such a vivid way talk about the slave trade and about the relationship between Brazil and Nigeria. And this is so much more impactful than reading about it, but actually being confronted with these buildings, it has so much more strength. And yeah, so it was very touching to see you know, how the people who live there, how they are talking about their buildings, but then yeah, really shocking to see how little there is being done about conserving the buildings, apart from a few landmarks, which of course is important and is better than nothing, but especially these sort of unassuming buildings, for me, made an impact. They left a strong impression.
Thank you. For me, it also challenges our concepts of conservation in a way, or my own concept of conservation. And this is also addressed by, I think this point is also addressed by another comment in the chat by Chitra Ganesh, who is linking it, like the situation of the Brazilian houses to the situation in Chennai, I think. Forgive me for striking close to home, but I believe a lot of the shop fronts in and around K&K Road, maybe you can elaborate more on this region. That would be interesting. And the shopping malls will seem similarly quaint in 20 to 40 years after the advent of sustainable housing planning in the city. Then the malls will be endangered like the Brazilian houses. Well, one can dream. And there's another, let me check, Kada Navas Khan Road in Chennai. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And there's another question by Chitra Ganesh in the Q&A. May I ask if you are influenced in a personal way by the work of Jane Dark and derived thinkers? I find the concept of primary generators and using empathy as a key element of the design process very, very important. Would you say it is part of your process?
I mean, empathy, I think, is very important if you do the kind of work where you're trying to get an insight into different cultures or countries. I think is the only way to approach, to approach working in other countries and places. So, and particularly in the house of Ellen Vaughan Richards, I found this element of empathy to be very strong, because it's in such a poetic and all-encompassing way does the house make use of the local resources, how it sort of fits itself into the natural state of the grounds, which are also in stark contrast to the surrounding areas, which, you know, it's a very urban area of Lagos. And there is this very strong feeling of empathy to the land, to the culture, to the nature when you walk in there, which was very touching for me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are two more questions that I would like to read out by an anonymous participant. First of all, thank you very much for showing us these very interesting images of these South African locations. They are not really South African locations, but West African locations in Nigeria. How long did it take to make the film? And was it difficult in some locations to film? It also kind of reminds me a bit of the Philippines.
Yeah, Philippines. Yeah.
Philippines. A part of my family is from Bohol, so it's kind of nostalgic to see such pictures of the old deteriorating buildings and the people living there, because the weather and nature is kind of similar to the African atmosphere.
I mean, in Nigeria, I was shooting for 3 weeks. And then, as we said before, it took basically 3 years to complete the whole project. And in fact, filming was very difficult because you're not actually allowed to, well, not technically allowed to film in public in Nigeria. And as soon as you pull out your camera on the street, someone will approach you and ask you what you are doing. And so that was also the reason why Kerstin connected me with Ade Remy, who is a photographer and a local in Lagos. And we were working together when I was shooting the material for the third part around the Brazilian houses, because for me, as a white person on my own and a woman, it would have been impossible to actually gather all the material. And even on the campus, I mean, I had a filming permit, but I usually kept it printed out in my bag, because I was approached numerous times a day by some security person who asked me what I was doing. So the whole process was actually not, maybe not as spontaneous as I would have liked sometimes. It was quite cumbersome in certain situations. And then, of course, in the private residence, I had very nice contact with the lady who lives there now. She's the daughter of the architect. So that was, for me, the most relaxing filming location, because I just had the grounds and the house to myself, and it was very, very calm and quiet. But the other locations, it was quite intense. Also very interesting, because you got to talk to so many people. I was always extremely exhausted at the end of the day, because I was just talking constantly with people about what I was doing, where I was from. And which also added up to this sort of internal archive that I was able to use to incorporate it with my personal reflections for the film. So it was extremely useful, but at the time it was, it was quite intense.
Yeah, I also think that it was extremely important to have all these conversations going on while you were shooting, because now they became a voice in your project. And for example, if we think about the comment of a student who addresses the old-fashioned status of the residential buildings of the University of Ibadan, where the students were forced to live now, even if they would prefer another building surrounding environment. So I think this is really important, and this is also information that you get only when you are out on the street and
absolutely. I think I mean, this is what gives the work life for me, you know, because it's also about how do people use these buildings, how they're using the space. I mean, this is something you need to hear from the people who actually live there and who study there and whose houses are being torn down. That's not information you can read up.
I think there's another question by Victoria Norris, which addresses also the state of the Brazilian houses. I'm wondering if you know or can share why one of the Brazilian houses had "Beware" written next to the door. Is it at risk of collapsing?
No, it's actually something very strange. It's called the 491 scam. A lot of these old buildings that are look like they are uninhabited have this statement, "Beware of 491." And I found out that there is this practice that is ongoing where people sell houses that don't actually own, houses that they look uninhabited. They would sort of pretend that they are some kind of real estate person and actually sell the houses that they don't own. And that's why all these houses that are quite old or where there's maybe an uncertainty if there's still someone living there, they have this "Beware of 491" written on the house, which I also thought was, and that's also why when you come and you take photos of buildings, people are very suspicious because they think that you are sort of complicit with that kind of practice, and maybe you're there to take photos to put them up on the internet to sell the house. I've never heard of anything like that before, but it seems to be quite a common thing in Lagos.
Thank you.
Actually, if I could come in there, this was reminding me of a very similar experience that we had over here in Chennai. You know, when we're always on the lookout for interesting public spaces, you know, where we could showcase work and where we could work with the local communities and the local people who are either living there. And Chennai has the famous Marina Beach, and there is a big housing society and a housing board colony, you know, that is there, where a lot of the fisher folks and their families, you know, these were given to them, you know, when they when the slum clearance board cleared out a lot of the older sort of slums, you know, where they were living, and gave them these supposed paka homes, you know, to live in. And there were these questions about, you know, as an arts organization, when we go and try and take over some of these spaces for artistic purposes, how does it, you know, I mean, they're very suspicious about why you're there and what are you planning to do, because let aside the whole art thing, but I think it's also with the same kind of fear that you were just referring to, Nico, that, you know, are they going to possibly get evacuated? What's going to happen? Because it's such a struggle any which way to kind of survive. And then on top of that, you know, being the outsider, you know, it's hard to navigate through some of these doubts and some of these relationships that we haven't even established, and we haven't even worked with any of those communities. So just suddenly landing up there and trying to, you know, explain your project to them, I think it's a question of, are we really interested in involving these communities into the work that we are doing, or you know, I don't know, it's still something that we are conscious, very conscious about, and we are working on, you know, as an organization. And also, what is the meaning of a takeover in our context when we take over a public space, or when we take over a supposed housing board for, let's say, a big work of art that we might want to put out there? But what is the politics of it all, you know, when it comes to structure and how it's viewed, and are we really looking at bringing art to the people who are living there? Is it their art form in the first place or not? So I think somewhere, you know, when I was looking through your work, there were all these questions that kept coming back to me, and I just thought I'll share it with you. Yeah.
But that's really interesting, because of course the work is about the Nigerian context, but I think the tendencies or a lot of the aspects are really universal, and it doesn't just refer to Nigeria, but I mean, as you just nicely pointed out, you can see similar things and thoughts happening in India. So that's really, really good, good to hear that it works that way.
Makes us feel even more sad about the situation that we were not able to visit Chennai.
Yeah.
Maybe we will still do that one day, Kerstin.
Yeah, we have to. We're actually thinking.
We're not going anywhere. We are here. So the moment the world opens up and is safer, please do come. So I guess there are no more questions.
I have one last question.
Priya.
I have one last question before we go. I mean, I studied architecture. So during my final year project, so one of the things that I had proposed was something in relation to conservation itself. And that time, my father was able to put me in touch with somebody who worked for the government, so I could propose my project to them. So I wanted to check with you if you were able to sort of share your studies with the local authorities there. Do you know, like, is there something that with the project that we are doing, okay, the documentation that we are doing, do you see a hope that it could sort of change something in the conditions over there, or, you know, it helps the people living there, the buildings, like, are they able to take it forward, or did that happen at all, or like what was the response like?
I mean, on site, I actually avoided being in touch with the local authorities because of the difficulty that I mentioned regarding filming in the public sphere, because the more kind of obvious you are, the more problematic it becomes for you in the long run. So that's not something I was pursuing at the time, because I really had to avoid, because I only had 3 weeks and I needed to get a lot of work done. So I was very worried about getting in more trouble. But I mean, I was in touch with the Goethe Institute in Lagos, and I mean, the film is only just being finished, and of course I'm thinking about how I can, you know, share it with people in Lagos, because I think, of course, it would be interesting, you know, to for them to have a record of that, and or to show it, or, but I will definitely be looking into that, where it could be placed, so it could be useful, you know, also for people who live there. And
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, also, I think young architects, right? Like when I was studying, it was very difficult for me to find research material that was based in that space. And I mean, the only reason actually I was able to do that because my father was from this space and he could put me in touch with people. But like from a college perspective, I think there's a lack of material, and like films like these would be so much more useful for us when we are studying. So I just feel, yeah, just that. I wish
Yeah,
I had
no, that's
somebody made a film like this when I was studying.
no, you're right. I mean, I was able to find this. It's a dissertation from Newcastle, which I'm also citing in the film, and it's a very, very extensive dissertation about conservation in Lagos and Lagos State. It's from the 90s, but I mean, it's still relevant because I didn't see much difference or I mean, there was even less buildings now than, and that was accessible online, and to me it was extremely helpful, you know, to be able to go through this study, which is super precise. But yeah, but you're right. I mean, there is not a lot because conservation doesn't seem to be sort of the main
focus point.
the main goal. But yeah, but I was able to see that, of course, there is people who have really extensively looked into this, but yeah, they just don't seem to have the voice that would be necessary in order to really make a big change to how the city is developing. Because I mean, there's a lot of investors, there's a lot being built, high-rise buildings going up. When we were there, the last public beach that there was in Lagos had been closed down because they were building, you know, these sort of projects into the sea, like in Dubai, where they're building the world.
Yeah,
They were doing something similar there. And so the whole society there really seems to be about this sort of, you know, development and progress, and there is not much looking back. It's just about sort of focusing on the growth, which of course is also questionable, because what kind of people can afford living in these kind of housing estates? That's certainly not the people who are being pushed out of their small Brazilian one-story building. So yeah, it's I was quite disheartened with experiencing Lagos and the way it's developing. I thought it was pretty brutal, actually. The tendencies that were obvious there, but I think it's probably the same tendencies in a lot of countries where, I mean, as you're pointing out, there seems to be a lot of overlap with India as well.
Also the erasure of history, right? Like from what I have seen so far and whatever I have studied, a lot of, like how you mentioned, those structures were proof of the trade and of the relationship that were there between Brazil and Lagos. But like similarly, there would have been so many other more buildings like that, but as they get demolished and as new construction keeps coming up, those histories are removed. We might sometimes, you know, few years later, 10 years later, I might see a completely concrete structure, but I might not know what actually happened in that space 10 years back.
Unless
So
it's
like
documented.
Unless it's documented, yeah.
True.
Unless it's documented and it's available to people. Sometimes like even oral narratives are important, but I feel like structures themselves have so much history to say, and that kind of goes away when there is so much like modern architecture happening. But yeah,
Priya, maybe you should take this film back to your college and show it to your professors, your faculty, and to the current batch of students.
Yes.
In fact, just very quickly, Priya, there's a question for you from Chitra. Do you want to just take that up quickly? And then maybe we can close the session.
Where would we go? Say much conversation in terms of hi, I studied in Bangalore in this college called Danand Sagar, and unfortunately there was no discussion of conservation there. I had to just build and increase my like footprint. But yeah, I would love to get in touch with you. I mean, you can just write, maybe we'll just write to each other. I'll get your email and then I'll just write and then we'll get in touch.
Amazing. that's one of the reasons why we have these conversations.
Yeah. Excellent.
Great.
Nice. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
so
Nico.
Nico.
That was really lovely. The film was really lovely.
I
Thank
hope
you.
everybody in the audience also enjoyed the work. And in case if you would like to, go watch it again, I think I'm going to watch it again for sure. But I would highly encourage that. Sign up for our screening room online so you can comfortably watch it at your home. And we also have another conversation with two very interesting artists, Katja Stuke and Oliver Sieber, coming up on the 21st. So do check us out on Instagram or on our website, and you can sign up for that as well. But thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. And I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Nico, for making this work. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done. I don't think it just stops here. And I'm sure you have plans of how maybe you might want to continue with this work, and take it back to maybe Lagos and its people, I hope.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Kerstin.
Thank you, Kirsten.
It's a pleasure to find it. I mean, this is the first sort of official screening that we did of the film. So it was also a little bit of a premiere kind of moment for me, which is super nice and also very important to not sort of be stuck in my own room.
Even if it was on Zoom. But
but still.
Yeah.
No, it was
yeah,
very
but
nice.
also for me, it was a very special event, this online screening now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I already have another, several questions that just came up afterwards, but we'll keep in touch.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Great. And we will wait to welcome you in India, in Chennai.
Yeah,
Nico,
well,
this is what we have to plan.
Absolutely.
I'm up for it.
As soon as it's possible.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for the organization, for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you, dear audience. Hope to see you soon.
And thank you, Kirsten, for making us meet Nico as part of this edition. It's fantastic. See you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.